Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. We are here tonight to do a few things. Many people throughout the history of our show have asked me to do a show on tonight's subject, which is the Shroud of Turin. But I have very effectively evaded doing a show on this particular subject. And there's a few reasons for that. First, I was raised Catholic, Christian, specifically Catholic. So I'm sure that I have my biases about a lot of this. But those biases may be not what you think, because I was a very inquisitive young man. And I suppose anybody who knows me knows that I'm very skeptical of paranormal claims and probably always have been. And it didn't matter to me whether it was the gypsy fortune teller saying she could talk to your dead grandmother in our neighborhood, or the Catholic priest that said Mass every Sunday. When people claimed miraculous or paranormal, supernatural things, I was always very skeptical. And so the Shroud of Turin has been one of those mysteries, however, an enduring mystery, which I can't ever quite make my mind up on. So, when people ask me, what is my opinion on the Shroud? It's in my gray basket, and perhaps it always will be until further scientific studies are done. So we're going to be going over a great deal. I have so much to share with you. And the other thing that we are doing is going back to trying to cover more subjects than personalities or people, because we can see the trouble the covering people can bring, like legal troubles or lawsuit threats, or, I don't think the Catholic Church or anybody is going to threaten to sue me for expressing my opinions on this subject tonight. Maybe it's a bit safer. Maybe it's a bit, less stress. I don't have to worry about this one or anybody. Well, of course, people are so easily offended. I could say anything. So we'll take a moment to welcome in and recognize the live chat. We've got Sherry is in the live chat. Tim Curley is here. Our wonderful moderator, Arlene. I saw Spooky earlier. Operation Shutdown, Blazing Mad. Trolly Troll is here. Jonathan Matten is here. Garaji is here. Diaper Fur holding down the Kick live chat. Von Schergen, Pig Monster 220 Real is here. One moment here. And if I missed you, I apologize. The Outer Planet is here. Shout out to the Outer Planet. Patty Wilhelm is here. Ray Gunner is here holding down the Kick chat as well. Sherry is saying she was brought up in the Roman Catholic Church. Well, we're going to get into this. So when I was younger, I first heard about the Shroud of Turin, which purports to be, or alleges, some allege it to be, the actual burial shroud or cloth of Jesus Christ. And, there is historical proof that a man named Jesus in that time, general date and region, existed and was crucified by the Romans. Some people say otherwise. People will say what they're going to say. The Jewish priests handed over Jesus to Pontius Pilate, the I supposed Roman authority in the region, who made the actual decision, famously washing his hands of the decision to crucify Jesus Christ. So this actual, it's a linen cloth, and it has a faint image of what appears to be a naked man with wounds consistent with Roman crucifixion at the time of Jesus. And I'm going to go on script now, if nobody minds, because I like to get the facts and the figures correct, and there is so much on this. But before I do that, I'm going to share my screen. The best pictures that I've, kind of looked all over the internet, and I found a few places that have some really good, high quality imagery of the Shroud of Turin. And here we can see the image is of the front of a human body that is crossing its arms over the groin area. There is a tremendous amount of people pointing out things, like there are wounds around the head that people say would be consistent with someone being tortured or forced to wear around a crown of thorns. There is a gash or wound on the side of the chest, which is consistent with Jesus and the biblical story that he was speared. They wanted to make sure he was dead. There are holes through the wrists and feet, also consistent with Roman crucifixion practices at the time. Although there was many, it should be noted, and this is probably a very little known fact, but there were an incredible variation in crucifixions. For example, some were crucified on an X cross, some on a T cross, some on a capital T cross. And sometimes the people would be tied to the cross. Sometimes they would be nailed to the cross. But what's very interesting about the Shroud of Turin to me is that it appears that this man depicted in the image was scourged and attacked with Roman whips that are consistent with Roman whips at the time. The wounds that are displayed on the image, I should say, are consistent with scourging weaponry that would be used to scourge a victim in those times. So there is just an incredible amount of things that lead many to believe that this is actually depicting the body of Jesus Christ. But what's incredible to me is that an incredible amount of different scientists, all different disciplines, have studied the shroud, and not one of them can tell you with certainty how the image got onto the shroud. Now, there are two different camps, I suppose, the skeptical camp and the believer camp, or, and but both are kind of puzzled as to how the image actually appeared. It doesn't appear that this image was painted on. The image is incredibly thin. It only penetrates the very, very top layers of the linen. But I'm going to go on to my script because I want to make sure that we get the facts and figures correct. And it's important to note, we'll also show you that there is the back image. So basically, the cloth was laid and a body apparently or allegedly was placed on it, and then it was folded over the front side of the body. So this one, the first image, is known as the ventral image or front image. And this website states it is usually viewed horizontally during an exhibition, but the image has been positioned vertically for better viewing. Large burns and scorch marks from the fire, this relic was in a fire in 1532, seem to frame the image. Look for the blood on the arms, nail wounds in the wrist, wound on the side, and blood in the head, on the head and hair. Also notice water stains from where the cloth was rolled up and kept in some kind of urn. A water stain over the knees shows the image is not water soluble. The edges of the water stains are due to calcium deposits. And the back image is known as the dorsal image. Notice the apparent crown of thorns and scourge marks around the crisscross and back of the legs. About 120 of such marks can be counted. There is blood, or appears to be blood, across the small of the back that flowed from the side wound after the body was laid out horizontally after death. At the bottom are the feet, one foot placed upon the other and nailed into position. Notice the nail wounds and corresponding blood flow. Now, now we're going to go, and interestingly, this was what people were seeing in the cloth before it was first photographed. But once it was photographed, first in 1898, that's where the story got stranger, in my opinion. So in 1898, the church uh, finally allowed the Shroud of Turin to be photographed for the very first time. And it was an amateur photographer which took the first image. And as the story goes, he went back to his dark room and almost dropped the photo plates, which at the time were glass, because the image in the negative was startling to him. Much more detail was shown in the negative image than would be shown to the naked eye. And this is, like I said, where the story gets strange, because either this is, as people believe or suggest, as the authentic burial cloth of Jesus, and some say there was some sort of radiation event when Jesus rose from the dead, which caused the image to appear in the cloth. I don't know if that's true or not, but we'll be exploring all of people's theories tonight during this deep dive. But what was interesting is when the photograph was, when the shroud was first photographed in 1898, an incredible amount of detail, much more than can be seen with the naked eye, could be shown. And it's almost as if the negative is actually the positive of the image. It appears much more like, almost like a photograph. The negative appears almost like a photograph of, this crucified man. And as the story goes, the photographer was so shocked by what he saw, he almost dropped the plates, believing that he was the first person to see the real face of Jesus in over 2,000 years. So this is just a display, like a laid out copy of what the image looks like when it is in negative form. Now give me a moment here, because I have some more in more detail. This, of course, is the regular image or positive image. And people have noticed and said that the face looks just like the Jesus that we all know. But it's important to note that I don't believe that there was any like painted depictions of Jesus for hundreds of years after his death. So do we really know that Jesus was, brown haired, bearded? I don't know. But it is interesting what this face appears to be. To a Christian, that's the face of Jesus, or it appears very strongly that it could be the face of Jesus. And there's another depiction. So this is a full body of the negative image, which again, it shows an incredible amount more detail than you can see with the naked eye. And it's interesting that people were excited about the shroud before the picture, but after the picture is when it really rose to worldwide prominence as an alleged relic of the burial shroud of the biblical Jesus. So let me get back to my script, though. Before I do that, let's take a moment to thank some kind and generous benefactors. We've got Noka 48N says, "Aloha, friends. I'm here, but I will be driving. I will look forward to the show. I love history. Thank you, Stephen, for your awesome work." Well, thank you, Noka, for your kindness, generosity, and support. And with regrets, I apologize, but I'm not going to be playing a lot of stripper bumpers tonight. Just I don't want to talk about Jesus and play stripper bumpers to thank people for the super chats tonight. I hope you understand. And Tim Curley is here with one for the goal as well. Thanks, Stephen. Great topic, and I appreciate your deep dive and research here. Another great show as always. Well, it just started. It might be terrible. And I've noticed we got pretty low attendance tonight. See what happens when I go off the script, even if or our usual subject matter, I guess. even when I'm doing something that so many people have asked me to do. And I want to put on the record, I was raised Catholic, and even when I was a child, it, whether the shroud, I could ask 10 different priests and 10 different nuns, and 10 different priests and 10 different nuns would all give me a different answer when I asked them if the shroud of Turin really is the burial shroud of Jesus. Some believed it is, and some were more skeptical and claimed that it might have been a forgery. Now, it's important to note that the historical, chain of custody is very important. So, as far as the chain of custody goes, we only know the Shroud of Turin has been known or existed since the 1300s, leading many to believe that this is a forgery from the 1300s, when religious reliquary or relics were a big financial draw. In other words, people kind of went nuts in Europe and would say, "Oh, have you been to this church? It has the nails of the crucifixion from when Jesus was crucified in their altar." And other people would have different relics of all different types. And these were big tourist draws, and therefore a big financial boon to the churches that housed them. So many people think that the shroud was just a created art piece, a fake, designed to fool pilgrims so that they could make money off of the tourism and the pilgrims. But back to my back to my script here, so that we get things correctly on the record. So the Shroud of Turin is a linen cloth bearing the faint image of a crucified man, or apparently crucified man. And this has captivated scholars, scientists, and the faithful for centuries now. It is often purported to be the actual burial shroud of Jesus Christ. It remains one of the most studied artifacts in history. Tonight, I'm going to try my best to provide a balanced, scholarly presentation here and present the strongest arguments for the shroud's authenticity as a first century relic, alongside some compelling evidence suggesting it is indeed a medieval forgery. Now, you may know why I can't make up my mind on this one. Key scientific analyses will be explored, including what I think was one of the most important scientific studies of the shroud, the 1988 carbon 14 dating. We'll be discussing that in detail. Also, I think we can't really cover this without covering the Catholic Church's official stance on the shroud's authenticity. We'll be exploring that, along with its economic implications for the church and the city of Turin. Like I said, there's plenty of tourist dollars to be had, and I believe the last time that the shroud was actually exhibited publicly, usually they keep it in a box, a temperature-controlled box that I think is even filled with argon gas because it's inert. They're trying to preserve this thing forever. It's not just like hanging up in the church, but when they do display it, hang it up, and let people come and see the actual shroud, they draw millions and millions of people. Now, I will say, to their credit, the Catholic Church doesn't like sell tickets to these events, but if somebody goes there, they're going to draw. They pass the collection plate around. Let's leave it at that. They certainly pass the collection plate around to those 2 million people. So we're going to really dig deep into some historical records tonight, some scientific studies, and more modern scientific studies and analyses. But really, I titled tonight's broadcast, Enduring Mysteries, because this one is one of those. It's just an enigma to me. I really think there needs to be a lot more research into the shroud from a scientific perspective. The problem is that the Catholic Church is the gatekeepers. So just some more facts and figures. The shroud is actually a rectangular linen cloth measuring approximately 4.4 meters by 1.1 meters, and it features a faint straw It features faint straw yellow images of the front and back of a naked man with his hands folded over his groin. The figure appears to be bearded, with shoulder length hair and wounds that many say are consistent with biblical descriptions of Jesus' crucifixion, including marks on the wrists, feet, side, and forehead. There are reddish brown stains on the cloth that were originally interpreted as blood. Later, I believe later scientific evidence proved that those stains were blood, aligned with these crucifixion injuries. The cloth is woven in a 3-to-1 herringbone twill pattern from flax fibers and is consistent with burial shrouds consistent with that time period and geographical location. The shroud shows signs of historical damage, including burn marks from the 1532 fire, and this was repaired with patches. It is housed in Turin, Italy, at St. John the Baptist Cathedral. Since 1578, it has been there. But the shroud's origins really are, especially from a historical perspective, are shrouded in mystery. The documented history of this particular shroud, which, by the way, I just want to make sure we understand that many people try to say that some other historical artifacts were actually the Shroud of Turin, but they called it something different, or they thought it was something different. You know, people are trying to fill in the blanks, I suppose you could say, from 0 to 1354 with other sightings. For example, there was a painting several hundred years before 1354 that depicted something that looked like the Shroud of Turin, and people say, well, there's the proof that it existed before 1354. It's a bit of a quagmire looking into the history, but the documented history or chain of custody begins in 1354 in Liry, France, where it was exhibited by the knight Geoffrey de Charnay. Prior to this, there are really no reliable records about the shroud, although some proponents suggest connections to earlier relics like the image of Edessa. And the shroud, since it surfaced, has passed through various owners, including the House of Savoy, before being donated to the Holy See or Catholic Church in 1983. Public exhibitions of the actual shroud are very rare, with notable viewings in 2010 with over 2 million visitors, and 2015. And there was another planned exhibition for 2025, but I believe that has been canceled. The shroud's image, which was first revealed to be a photographic negative in 1898 by Secondo Pia. He was the photographer who took the first picture. And by the way, when Secondo Pia took this first picture, everybody said that he faked the picture, that it was some sort of crazy hoax for publicity. But when it was next allowed to be photographed, people found the same result. This incredible image appeared in the negative. The shroud exhibits unique properties that have fueled debates over its authenticity. Some view the Shroud of Turin as some sort of miraculous imprint from Christ's resurrection, like a byproduct of that event. Others see it merely as a clever medieval artwork. But tonight, like I said, we're going to try to balance these perspectives. I'll be giving you the arguments for authenticity that proponents of the shroud use, and also I'll be giving you the perspective of some of the more skeptical people who have studied this artifact. So, proponents of the shroud's authenticity argue that it is indeed, and could be, a lot of people use some strange phrasing too, like it couldn't be anything else other than this, the burial cloth of Jesus. And it's interesting to note that much like in the UFO community or in the ghost hunter community, there exists sort of talking points which get repeated ad nauseum, often without proof. So we have to be very careful when we examine the things that people are claiming or saying. But as far as it being an authentic relic from the first century, there are several lines of evidence that support this claim, like the image formation and its properties. The image is superficial, penetrating only the top 200 to 600 nanometers of the fibers. And the shroud has been found to be without pigments, binders, paint, or anything like that. Of course, people still argue this issue. But there is some science to support that there is none of those things. There's no pigments, paint, or, medium that could have been used to create, I have been studying high resolution images. And to me, a lot of, especially not the negative image, but when you look at it with the naked eye, it really looks to me like it was almost burned into the cloth, not painted into the cloth. So interesting that we also found out that the image in the shroud actually encodes three-dimensional information. And this was demonstrated by image analyzer studies in the 1970s, which suggested that the image may have been formed by contact with a three-dimensional object, possibly a body. Years after the 1970s, image analyzer studies first noticed that there's actual 3D data and information that is embedded into the image. And I get when people say, "Oh, it's a fake." I don't understand, even if it's a fake from the 1300s, how somebody knew how to encode 3D image information in a 2D image. That's another mystery about this whole thing. So forensic pathologists have looked at the shroud and confirmed the anatomical accuracy of wounds that are consistent with Roman crucifixion of the first century, including nail marks in the wrist and over 120 scourge marks from a flagrum. That's what the Romans used to beat or whip prisoners and victims with. It's called a flagrum. And the injuries shown in the shroud are consistent with a Roman flagrum injury that you'd get from being scourged in the first century by the Romans. And this is very interesting because when people argue that this is a clever forgery or a clever hoax, I just think to myself, it must have been an incredible hoaxer because he was able to track down what a wound from a flagrum in the first century looks like and reproduce it exactly. There is also some biological and chemical evidence. The reddish stains on this shroud contain iron oxide and proteins that are consistent with human blood, including bilirubin levels that are indicative of trauma. So this, again, is consistent with somebody who has been crucified. And one of the most intriguing aspects that people point to as proof that the shroud is authentic is there's actually pollen grains from plants on the Shroud of Turin. This has been scientifically proven. And those pollen grains are from plants that are native only to the Jerusalem area. And this is perplexing because, again, if we imagine that there's someone in the 13th century that's trying to create a hoax burial cloth of Jesus, would they go so far as to figure out exactly what a flagrum wound looks like and reproduce it? And then, I don't understand. Do they go to Jerusalem and shake pollen off of plants there and put it on the shroud? Because there is verifiably pollen from plants that are native only to the Jerusalem area, which would be where Jesus lived, was crucified and allegedly buried before many believe that he rose from the dead. There was also a DNA analysis of some of what people believe is blood from the cloth, and this revealed human mitochondrial DNA from diverse ethnic groups compatible with ancient people living in the Near East in the first century. There was a 2022 wide-angle X-ray scattering study that analyzed linen degradation and dated the shroud to be somewhere between 55 and 74 CE, attributing discrepancies with prior dating to environmental contamination. So proponents argue that the image could result from a burst of radiation during resurrection. And this is just a hypothesis. There's no proof for it, but this is what many people have said. But that hypothesis is supported by some scientific findings that ruled out conventional artistic methods like painting or trying to burn the image into the cloth. These arguments for the shroud's authenticity portray the shroud as a relic that defies medieval technology. In fact, many of the proponents of its authenticity claim that no one in the 1300 time period could do this. I beg to differ, and we'll see some proof about that. Okay, now on the skeptical side, let me just check in with the live chat before we continue here. Trolly Troll is here with one for the goal. Not that I'm complaining or anything, but I seem to recall you did a show about the shroud once before. Nope, never have. Never have. You're confusing it with, we did do some shows that I called Christian Mysteries. And but we've never done a show. I'm thinking myself, you know, I did just have brain surgery, but no, I'm certain, Troll. We did not do a show about the Shroud of Turin yet, but thank you, Troll, for your kindness, generosity, and support. We'll take a moment to check in with the live chat as well. Well, this is a good question. Why would light from radiation have a beard shape? Yeah, I mean, what I have found about this Shroud of Turin in my studies of, and I've really dug deep here to see both sides of the arguments, is you get more questions than answers. Like I said, when I was a child, I would ask different priests if the shroud was real. And some of them believed, absolutely, Stephen, that's from when Jesus resurrected. He left a sign of his resurrection in the cloth. And others would say, no, somebody made it just to make money. You know, believe it or not, some priests are cynical and skeptical. That's funny that you should mention that. Orc War Chief Reviews. We're going to be getting into some of the other relic claims, and this is why I'm very skeptical of the Catholic Church, and I will explain why. It's something I like to call the incorruptible bodies scam that the Catholic Church runs. But let me get back to the skeptical side of the arguments. One moment here. Okay, so on the skeptical side of the arguments, one second. Burst of radiation. That's interesting. Okay, so on the skeptical side of things, the shroud's first appearance aligns with the medieval relic trade. In 1389, Bishop Pierre de Arcis of Troyes denounced the Shroud of Turin as a complete and total forgery, claiming that an artist confessed to, quote, painting it. There is no pre-1350 documentation about the shroud. And a 2025 study from a newly discovered document from philosopher Nicole Orismy reinforces that the shroud has medieval origins. And it's important to note that the medieval relic trade was big business. Like I said, people would, each church would have some form of relic. Oh, we've got the blood of Jesus in this cross, or we've got, the bones of Peter, or they all would claim that they had, for example, some churches claimed that they had a relic that was a piece of wood from from the cross that Jesus was crucified on. But if you were to take all of those relics and put them together, you would see that there's enough to make 10 crosses out of. So the relic trade is often fraudulent, many say. I believe that there are many Catholic relics that are completely and totally fake. And to this day, though, they make each of the churches where the relics reside tons of money. So I think a lot of me thinks that the Catholic Church doesn't want to spoil the party when it comes to relics. So there have been some scientific replications and analyses, including that one of the talking points you'll hear is that nobody can do this. We can't reproduce this. And that's really not the case. Several people have reproduced very, very similar imagery on a linen cloth through various means. And apparently the image or one very, very much like it can be replicated using techniques that were available in medieval times, such as bas relief rubbing with pigments or acid pigmentation. Walter McCrone's 1978 analysis detected red ochre and vermilion pigments in a gelatin medium, suggesting painting. So it wasn't exactly paint, but it was red ochre and vermilion pigments in a gelatin medium. So this is where things get kind of squirrely, because you have the believers saying, we've scientifically confirmed there's no paint. But then in 1978, they detected red ochre and vermilion pigments in a gelatin medium on the shroud. Isn't that paint? I think that's paint. It's something just like paint. I don't know. And then, of course, many of the skeptical experts have pointed to anatomical inconsistencies, like disproportionate limbs and unnatural blood flows, which indicate artistic creation or artistic license and not a natural process being shown here. Some of the blood flow analysis has been interesting. So it appears that the blood flow shown on the shroud is not what would anatomically happen if it was a natural process, which means somebody took some artistic license, and drama made it more dramatic. A 2025 3D analysis was just done, suggested that the image actually derives from a sculpture or bas relief. In other words, someone took a sculpture of a body that you kind of can see in the image, and then they put the shroud around it, first pigmenting somehow the sculpture. Then the cloth is placed around it, and the cloth gets an imprint from the sculpture. And there's a lot of experts that are really positive that this image was created by putting it over a sculpture, not a real human body. And then, of course, the most famous argument that skeptics make is the carbon-14 dating. In 1988, samples from the shroud were tested by laboratories at Oxford, Arizona, and Zurich using accelerator mass spectrometry. The results dated the cloth to be aged or from 1260 to 1390 CE with 95% confidence, which actually matches its historical debut then. When the shroud was, the carbon dating dates it to around the time that the shroud first entered history. So challenges include many believers challenge those carbon-14 results. So in other words, they carbon dated it, and it was clearly from medieval times, somewhere between, the studies varied, but somewhere between 1273 and 1390 is what it was dated at. But challengers to this carbon dating say there was sample contamination from repairs, something like invisible reweaving with cotton, or that fire damage could have created a false age, once carbon dated, and there is some scientific evidence for that. If the shroud was in a fire, well, there would have been a lot of smoke, and what's in smoke? Carbon. Smoke that when the shroud was in the fire, right, what would be normally a very straightforward test. It could have added carbon, and therefore the results of the carbon 14 analysis could be extremely flawed. Six, but it's interesting to note that no radiocarbon expert has invalidated these tests and the medieval date given. It's other people like religious scholars or that raise these arguments, but no actual expert in radiocarbon dating has invalidated those original tests. So skeptics emphasize the shroud's alignment with medieval history, artistry, and relic forgery practices. It was very common that people would fake relics in order to make money at the exact time that this so-called relic entered history. So skeptics argue that authenticity of this actually being the burial cloth of Jesus is very unlikely without additional testing, which would overturn the original carbon dating. It's interesting that the Catholic Church, who could clear all this up by just letting new tests take place, I don't know why they don't do that, their stance on the authenticity remains a neutral position. The Catholic Church neither endorses that it's actually the real burial cloth of Jesus, but they don't reject that either. Pope Francis in 2013 says it permits veneration as an object of devotion, viewing it as an icon of a man scourged and crucified. But Pope John Paul II and Benedict the 16th encouraged scientific study without any actual doctrinal commitment. In other words, they don't want to commit that, yes, this is the burial cloth of Jesus until more scientists study the cloth. The Catholic Church, apparently entrusts authenticating the shroud to be truly a first century relic, and therefore quite possibly or probably or the burial cloth of Jesus to science. And the Catholic Church, for as long as I can remember I was raised Catholic, I mentioned that some priests would tell me it was real and some priests would tell me it was fake. But there was also people that I would consider fence sitters, and they would say, this is still, no matter what it is, it's a valuable object because it has a great inspirational value to people and is a source of faith for many. Now, it's important that we talk about the economic impact of the Catholic Church in Turin, because this is where, I'm very fond of the saying, follow the money. The church in which this, the church in which the shroud is kept has made millions and millions and millions of dollars in donations when people come to visit. So I think there may be some economic factors when we think about this so-called relic or holy relic. So, of course, the shroud significantly boosts tourism and economic activity, particularly during exhibitions, though the Catholic Church does not directly profit from ticket sales, as viewings are free. But of course, like I said, they're going to pass the collection plate around. And if 2 million people visit, even if everybody only gives them $1 in the collection plate, that's a couple $1 million. And this, of course, stimulates Turin's economic activity and tourism through hotel bookings, dining, related spending. And hotels are always sold out in that whole area when they exhibit this relic. Of course, this provides an unusual bit of economic stimulus to that region. Um, so historically, relics like the shroud generate revenue through pilgrimages, donations, and of course, local commerce, enriching churches and the religions running those churches. For Turin, the 2025 exhibition that was planned was projected to drive significant growth, contributing to Italy's tourism sector, um, and generate millions of dollars during that event, which, by the way, I believe is canceled. They're not going to exhibit it in 2025. I try to look into why, and I'm not quite sure why. And there are some new initiatives, like a $5 million shroud museum in California, which opened in 2025. And that kind of highlights its ongoing economic draw beyond Turin. And it's also interesting to note that besides the Catholic Church, they're not the only people that are cashing in on this thing, because where did it go? There we go. These images are actually taken from a replica that you could buy on Amazon. That's right. For $169, you can have a life-size replica of the Shroud of Turin, either the positive image or the negative image, whatever you prefer. One moment here. I'll take a moment to catch up with the live chat. Yosef is here with one for the goal, saying, sorry about the surgery, bro. Side note, saw the old DSP interrogation. Interview. Awesome. As for the shroud, there's so much debate, but I believe. Well, there you go. And thank you, Yosef. I'm still on the fence. I'm still trying to make up my mind, but maybe I can if I go through enough of the evidence. The Outer Planet is here with one from the goal. I hope you mentioned the face cloth, the Sudarium of Oviedo. Yeah, I am going to, because, okay, I'll do it right now, actually, the Outer Planet. So there is another cloth that is closely tied or associated with the Shroud of Turin. It's called the Sudarium of Oviedo, but it is, I don't want to say less exciting. That's probably the proper term for it, though. It just looks like blood splotches on an old cloth that's, much smaller than the shroud. It's a few feet by a few feet. And that relic does trace back to, I think, the 5th century BC. They have a chain of custody for it from the 5th century BC forward. And it's interesting. People say that the Sudarium of Oviedo was placed over Christ's face and then removed and sopped up a lot of blood, and then the shroud was then placed over the body. And interestingly, many people believe that when you line up the Sudarium of Oviedo over the head image on the Shroud of Turin, that the blood and wounds match up. I'm not sure what I believe about that, but it is interesting that when you get into the blood analysis, it's the same blood or blood type. They haven't DNA matched it to each other, but it's the same blood type on both the Shroud of Turin and on this other face cloth, this other relic, the Sudarium of Oviedo. And that, to me, is very, very interesting. So thank you, the Outer Planet, and all of our kind and generous benefactors. We'll catch up with the live chat. Yeah, tampon blood magic. I want DNA tests on the cloth where they found that there is DNA in the blood, and the blood evidence get very interesting as well, because there appears to be pre-mortem blood on the cloth and post-mortem blood, post-mortem blood on the cloth, and pre-mortem blood. So, in other words, that means that there was blood from a living person. Somebody was alive when the blood from that person was deposited on the cloth. And there is then blood from someone who is deceased that is also shown on the cloth. I don't know how these Einsteins figured that out, but they did. In Orthodoxy, it's called the icon made without human hands. That's interesting. Yeah. So, one moment, let me get back to my notes here. So, just to wrap up this section, and we have a few more sections to share with you. The Shroud of Turin, to me, embodies a profound intersection of faith, science, and history. Arguments for its authenticity highlight its uh, inexplainable image and potential ancient origins, bolstered by some recent scientific studies. Conversely, carbon 14 dating and historical evidence strongly support that this is indeed a medieval forgery, with controversies surrounding it. The Catholic Church's agnostic stance about the shroud allows for interpretation and personal devotion without dogmatic assertion. While its exhibitions yield substantial economic benefits for Turin and the church housing the shroud through tourism and donations, I truly believe that there needs to be a great deal more of future research, perhaps involving non destructive redating, and that may resolve some of the lingering debates. And also, I believe that the Catholic Church should allow new carbon 14 dating. And this time, it should be performed by maybe 6 separate universities or experts in these matters. And there should be no doubt when the second testing is done. People have been trying to poke holes, I believe, into the first carbon 14 dating since 1988. And I remember when that carbon 14 dating came out in 1988, it was in, I believe there was a story in a Time magazine. And my father was big into, we got Popular Science, Time magazine, Popular Mechanics, and a few others. And I remember when the carbon 14 dating in 1988 came out, I felt like I finally had an answer. Oh, okay, it's a fake. But I suppose, recent reignited interest in some doing more science on this strange thing called the Shroud of Turin has kind of reignited many people's curiosity, including my own. Maybe the carbon 14 was off. People have suggested that they took a piece of one of the patches. I think this is very easy to clear up. And what's frustrating about all this debate about the carbon dating uh, is that the Catholic Church could give out, like a 1-inch single strand of thread from this relic, and then we could clear up all the confusion and all of the arguments and doubt about the original dating. So there really does need to be an incredible amount more research. But it's interesting to me just how many scientists are taking the scientific study of this relic or artifact incredibly seriously. So there's a great deal of research on the blood stains, and I have some more on the pollen. But before we get to that, one moment here. Before we get to that, we'll catch up with the live chat. Have China clone the blood sample. If they could get that's where this gets it gets kind of strange as a story. I've often thought that. What if they apparently did get mitochondrial DNA from what appears to be blood on the shroud. And what if that really is the blood of Jesus and they clone him? And then that's the Antichrist, right? Interesting idea, at least for a movie, right? So we're going to talk for a moment about why I don't trust the Catholic Church when they claim they have something paranormal or miraculous. And I've got a great personal story to share with you about that. One moment here. Okay. So there's a big reason that I don't trust the Catholic Church when it comes to what they tell me about miraculous things or supernatural things. This is the body of St. John Newman. It is in the Cathedral of St. John Newman in Center City, Philadelphia. Uh, Anybody remember Stand By Me? You remember that movie, Stand By Me? Hey, want to go see a dead body? So we had, during our religious classes, we had a class, and one of the classes was all about St. John Newman. And St. John Newman, uh, that is his purported to be his body in the bottom of this altar in his cathedral in Center City, Philadelphia. He had something that people call, or Catholics would call, an incorruptible body. And so essentially, one of the proofs that a saint is in heaven or is a saint, before someone is canonized as a saint, they exhume the body. They exhume the body, and there's strange because there's all different criteria, but apparently, if the body is in a certain condition, they declare the body to be incorruptible, like it doesn't rot. It's perfectly preserved, not mummified, but perfectly preserved. And what you will find if you dig into this very morbid, first of all, I think it's morbid to put a dead body on display in a church, but when I was a child, I was like, wait, so this guy's body is in the church in a glass box and you could just go look at it? And the priest teaching the class said, yeah, anybody can go and see it. And I was like, is that his real body, Father? And yeah, that's his real body. And at that point, I was very young. I don't think I'd ever seen a dead body before. So, being a curious young man, I got some bus fare and I went down to the Cathedral of St. John Newman to see this body that apparently was in perfect condition and had not decayed. And I got to tell you, it was a pretty disappointing experience because what happened is I was an altar boy, so I wasn't afraid of like walking around a Catholic church or up on the stage or on the altar. And I walked right up. I went into the cathedral and it was, I don't know, mid morning, maybe 10 a.m. And there was nobody there. And this was on a Saturday, and the weather, as I recall, was terrible. It was like really cold and rainy, like icy rain. So there's nobody around. And I'm looking around the church and there's nobody around. And I went to the first pew, the closest that I could get without going up on the stage. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm going, that's not a real body. It can't be a real body. And so eventually I got up the courage. I looked around again and I walked right up to this thing and put my nose right in the glass, right at this guy's head. And I'm looking at it and I'm looking at it and I go, that's a mask. That's not a person's face. And then all of a sudden I was startled because a priest had come into the church from the side door or something and startled me. Young man, you're not allowed up there. And I'm like, good Catholic boy, like, oh, I'm sorry, Father. I just had to see it close up. I came all the way here on the bus and everything to see St. John Newman. And so the priest stopped to talk to me for a few minutes. And I said, that's not a real face. And he said, no, it's a wax mask. I said, what? What do you mean it's a wax mask? It's supposed to be incorruptible. Well, yeah, but they use a wax mask. And I'm like, well, is the rest of them preserved? Why do you need the mask if his face and his body is perfectly preserved? And he explained, all these different reasons for why they do that. I don't know. But I look back at it again, this time sure that what I was seeing was a mask. So it turns out, if you really dig into this, and this is a morbid subject, they basically just build a wax dummy around this person's skeleton. And then they tell everybody that the body does not rot, it's incorruptible, which the term incorruptible is kind of a stupid it's kind of a stupid thing. One moment though. I have a video about this. So this is why I'm skeptical of any church, especially the Catholic Church, making claims. They might ask yourself, why would they do that? Fake a body. And again, it's money. Every year, people go on pilgrimages to St. John Newman's Cathedral. They make a lot of money. They make a lot of money. A lot of money. One moment here. Am I getting tripped up here? I have a video about the incorruptible bodies. And I get it that this is kind of off the beaten path, right? But you know what, before we do that, I want to share this video about the 3D information that is encoded. And we'll put our fair use banner up. This is a transformative work. We're educating the public. We'll be critiquing the video that we're sharing and discussing it with our live chat. This is fair use, friends. One moment here. So there's a man named Ray Downing who is a 3D CGI artist. And when he heard and realized that there was 3D information that was embedded in the Shroud of Turin image, he became intrigued. And he wondered if he could take the data from the 3D information that is encoded in the shroud and create a model of the true face of the man from the cloth. And this is where it gets interesting. And by the way, if you just if you use YouTube search bar and just put in Shroud of Turin, you will find there was a documentary that was called the real face of Jesus. Now they're calling it something else, but it's on YouTube. You can watch it for free. Very, very interesting and informative piece on the Shroud of Turin and on this person, Ray Downing.
It's been shrouded in mystery for almost 2,000 years. The true face of Christ. In all of human history, no other face is as recognizable as the face of Jesus. And yet no one knows what Jesus actually looked like. Now, for the first time, modern technology, science,
so here we see
religion come together.
I wasn't quick enough on this still.
The face of Christ.
So that is a depiction of how the shroud was placed around the body, which I think is very important so we can see
Christ. In a chapel in Turin, Italy, encased in bulletproof glass, is the most studied object in the world, the Shroud of Turin.
I don't know that that's an accurate statement. The most studied object in the world? I will say that I believe it's really like thousands of scientists have studied this thing. So maybe.
This ancient cloth bears the image of a tortured and crucified man. Some believe this artifact to be the actual burial shroud of Jesus. The face of the man in the shroud.
And here we see a close-up image of what appears to be the face in the shroud.
Was scarcely visible until a startling.
And here's the negative version of it. So that's a much better view. And isn't it incredible? Like, that looks like a photograph to me. It really looks like a photograph when the negative image is shown. Shrouded in mystery. Yes. All right, one moment here. No 1, 2, 3 ABC with one for the goal saying praise the cash. Thank you for your kindness, and I hope you all forgive me. I didn't want to be talking about Jesus and playing stripper bumpers tonight, so we'll save the strippers for another night. Try to be a serious, studious, research-based show for once. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. Much, much appreciated. 1 second. So this is a good close-up where you can really see, like, it looks like a photograph. It looks like a photograph of a face. How did a medieval artist get that image on that cloth? And how did they know that years later something called photography would be invented? And when you negative the image, you'll get this startling view of it, looking like a photograph of a man. It's pretty interesting to me.
Photographic negative was produced. But there is an additional, inexplicable property of this image which caught the attention of 3D computer graphics artist Ray Downing.
Yeah, and look at that. So when they pull the image and the 3D data, Ray Downing is this artist. He has said that it's almost like there was instructions for creating a mold embedded in the image, which I think is pretty interesting. And now I just want to be sure that we're clear. There wasn't even Ray Downing would admit there wasn't a complete data set. They were only able to extrapolate so much 3D information from the image on the shroud. And then, of course, they have to use some artistic license. For example, they had to figure out the eyebrows, which weren't clear in the 3D data, or it wasn't pristine enough to know exactly the shape and width and everything. So they had to use some artistic license when creating this 3D rendered face of what appears to be the man in the shroud. But still, it's still pretty interesting what they were able to do from the 3D information that they could get from the actual image.
Encoded within the fibers of this cloth is 3D information which shouldn't be there. It's as if someone, using an unknown technology, hid a blueprint for constructing a three-dimensional statue within this two-dimensional image.
That's very interesting. Go back to that here. See that?
Statue within this two-dimensional image.
And like I said, Ray Downing has said it was almost like they encoded instructions for making a mold of the face, a negative mold of the face in the image, in a two-dimensional image.
Over a year, extracting and refining this encoded information to create that statue.
That's some incredible dedication. The guy spent a year of his life to see what he believed to be the face of Jesus.
To reveal for the first time.
And here is the result of that work.
The face of the man in the shroud. This new portrait of Jesus drew worldwide attention in the news media.
Yeah, this was a big worldwide story when originally this person, Ray Downing, and I believe he did it with some funding from the History Channel. They, of course, made a documentary about it.
The subject of a History Channel special. Inspired by quotes from the New Testament, Downing has gone on to illustrate a library of Jesus portraits based on the Shroud of Turin image, a face both hidden and
Yeah, so after the initial extraction and building of it, then he went on to make like a whole gallery of artistic renderings of the face from the shroud.
Revealed in time. Suffer little children, and forbid them not to come unto me. Lazarus, come forth.
So these are artistic depictions of stories from the Bible, but using the face that was extracted from the Shroud of Turin.
O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you.
So he named each of the paintings or artistic works after one verse of a Bible
to thy hands,
in the New Testament.
My spirit. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. I am the resurrection and the life. My kingdom is not of this world.
All right, well, we get through that, and I have a few more bits to share with you for this evening. Now, I have to say there's just so much to go through that you could never do it. I'd be here for 12 hours. So we might do a part 2, maybe a part 3, as I sift through all of the data. The deep dive will continue, but one moment here. How did I not? I didn't upload the one file to my Google Drive. Let me get that right now. 1 second. So there's a very interesting YouTube channel which is run by an actual funeral director, a mortician, and she was very interested about those incorruptible bodies, as was I. One moment here. Oh wait, let me just. I don't want to not mention her incorruptible bodies. She's one of the first search results. This mortician has a couple million subscribers. She talks about morbid stuff, kind of gothy girl, and a mortician. Let me get that before we share the video. How to tell if your saint is incorrupt is the, yeah. So her name is Caitlin Dougherty, Doughty, or Doty. Caitlin Doty. And she made an interesting video. And this, again, is why I have doubts about. Let's give that a few minutes here. I want to share some of the more skeptical side of the story as well, because there's many people, like I said, that use talking points like they couldn't have done this in the 13th century. And that is apparently not the case at all. So, and there is also somebody appears to have proved that the Shroud of Turin wasn't laid on a human body, but rather a sculpture, a modeling study suggests. So we'll share that. One moment here. So some of the talking points of the true believers get kind of ripped apart as people perform experiments. In a study published Monday, July 28th, in a journal of archaeometry, Brazilian 3D digital designer Cicero Moraes, who specializes in historical facial reconstruction, used modeling software to compare how the cloth drapes over a human body versus how it drapes over a low-relief sculpture of one. The image on the Shroud of Turin is more consistent with a low-relief matrix, Moraes told Live Science in an email. Such a matrix could have been made out of wood, stone, or metal, and pigmented or even heated only in the areas of contact, producing an observed pattern, he said. So here is a sort of 3D illustration of how the shroud could have been placed over a sculpture of a body to create the image somehow. And according to this digital artist, this is more consistent. The image on the shroud is more consistent with being placed over a statue or a created sculpture rather than an actual human body. So, and I suppose low relief would mean it would be kind of flatter. So a 3D body would create a different sort of an image, apparently, than a low relief sculpture would. I just thought that was pretty interesting part of the story. So when people say it's definitely from being placed over a human body, the jury's out even on that. And one of the other skeptical takes that I thought was incredibly important is that, you know, people have said, and like I said, it's not a fact, but rather a talking point. People have said that this could not have been produced in the 13th century. They just didn't have the technology to do it. And here from NBC News, Italian scientists, again, this is fair use, reproduces the Shroud of Turin. An Italian scientist said he has reproduced the Shroud of Turin, a feat that he says proves definitively that the linen some Christians revere as Jesus Christ's burial cloth is indeed a medieval fake. So on the left, we have the image from the actual Shroud of Turin. And on the right here, it's pretty close. is an image that this person created. An Italian scientist said he has reproduced the Shroud of Turin, the article states, a fact that he says proves definitively that the linen some Christians revere as Jesus Christ's burial cloth is, in fact, a medieval fake. The shroud, and they give the measurements here, bears the image eerily reversed like a photographic negative of a crucified man, which some believers say is Christ. And the scientist goes on to say, we have shown that it is possible to reproduce something like which has the same characteristics as the shroud. Luigi Gallisaccioli, who is due to illustrate the results at a conference on the paranormal this weekend in northern Italy. The scientist is a professor of organic chemistry at the University of Pavia. He made available to Reuters the paper he will deliver and the accompanying comparative photographs. So to get the image, scientists have been at a loss to explain how the image was left on the cloth. Garlashelli reproduced the full-size shroud using materials and techniques that were available in the Middle Ages. They placed a linen sheet flat over a volunteer and then rubbed it with a pigment containing traces of acid. A mask was used to create the face. The pigment was then artificially aged by heating the cloth in an oven and washing it, a process which removed it from the surface but left a fuzzy halftone image similar to that on the shroud. He believes the pigment on the original shroud faded naturally over the centuries. Then they added blood stains, burn holes, scorches, and water stains to achieve the final effect. Well, that's problematic because there is historical evidence that the shroud was in a fire, but okay. The Catholic Church does not claim the shroud is authentic, nor that it is a matter of faith, but says it should be a powerful reminder of Christ's passion. This guy's name is something else. Garlashelli, the scientist, expects people to contest his findings. If they don't want to believe the carbon dating done by some of the world's best laboratories, they certainly won't believe me, he said. The accuracy of the 1988 carbon dating tests were challenged by some hardcore believers who said restorations of the shroud in past centuries had contaminated the result. The history of the shroud is long and controversial. After surfacing in the Middle East and France, it was bought by Italy's former royal family, the Savoys, to their seat in Turin in 1578. In 1983, ex-King Umberto II bequeathed it to the late Pope John Paul. The shroud narrowly escaped destruction in 1997 when a fire ravaged the Garni Chapel of the Turin Cathedral, where it is held. The cloth was saved by a fireman who risked his life. Garlashelli received funding for his work by an Italian association of atheists and agnostics, but said it had no effects on the result. Money has no odor. This was done scientifically. If the church wants to find me in the future, here I am. So that's interesting that he was able to produce a pretty good reproduction of something like the Shroud of Turin. And he did it with things that would be available during the 13th century. So just be warned that when you hear people technology to do this and things like that, I don't really like people stating things as facts when there's no evidence to support those facts. And there is actually some evidence that dispute that this could be done in the 13th century, because here we have a pretty good reproduction of something like the Shroud of Turin. It was done in a very low-tech way. And so could the Shroud of Turin have been created in the 13th century? It looks like it could have been. But I'd be interested to see if the reproduction has the same 3D data embedded in the image or not. Certainly looks pretty similar to the original Shroud of Turin image negative. Okay, so we're going to go to back to incorruptible bodies and why I don't trust most things that the Catholic Church says. So we mentioned this mortician, and her channel is Caitlin Doty, Doughty, and it's Caitlin, Caitlin. I'll add a link to this video in the description of our video. She's got an interesting channel if you're morbid like me. So this is her talking about these incorruptible bodies. And as we watch these videos, maybe you, my viewers, will understand that when somebody says this is paranormal or this is supernatural, I don't believe them. And there's reasons why, because we can catch them faking things, literally scamming the public with completely fake claims like this body doesn't decay. Okay. I beg to differ, right? So along with my, I would truly love to believe that that was really the burial cloth of Jesus. But the carbon dating bothers me a great deal. The fact that it arrived right when everybody was going relic crazy in the Middle Ages there, in Europe, and it was such a big business, these fake relics, it makes me incredibly skeptical of the claims that people make. And then again, just because someone is a priest doesn't mean that they are immune to, I don't want to say lying, embellishing, or just believing something on faith rather than science. So let's take a look at this video and keep in mind that the church has been delaying the inevitable scientific research into this shroud, and I think they have a vested financial interest to keep it open. Well, it may be real, it may not be real. The science that determined that it was from the 13th century may have been flawed. We don't know. It may have been contaminated results. They like to keep it open-ended so that the mystery, I think, remains, and so does the money flowing into this church in Turin, where the Shroud of Turin is housed. But here's just a quick look into some of the claims that the Catholic Church makes that are completely and totally provably bullshit.
Lellis died in 1614 at age 64. And look at him now, looking fabulous for a guy who just turned 465.
Yeah, guy looks pretty good for a guy who just turned 465. And again, they say that this person is a saint and that his body is incorruptible, which to most Catholic means it doesn't rot, it doesn't decay, it stays perfectly preserved forever, which is kind of a strange thing. And for those that are not Catholic, there are, I don't know, there's got to be probably 50, maybe less, 25 at the least, different churches which have these bodies of saints somewhere in their church, and they are a source of revenue. People come on pilgrimages to see these incorruptible bodies. But as in the case of St. John Newman, all is not what is claimed. St. John Newman, they claimed, has an incorruptible body. It's a wax mask. But this one is one of the best examples of the fakery, in my opinion. You're going to say that this saint is in heaven and his body's incorruptible and it doesn't decay or rot or, stink. I don't know.
Am I right? He's incorrupt, as fresh as the day he died. Thanks, Catholicism. Wait, I don't mean to be a negative Nancy here, but he doesn't really look miraculously incorrupt to me.
And by the way, I just want to mention that we are sharing this video to educate the public. This is a transformative work. We're educating the public. And we want to thank Dave7244 for a $2 super chat. How much of the 3D rendering is artistic license? Well, you can watch the full documentary. From what I remember, they took artistic license with eyebrows and eyelashes that I'm aware of. But I think much of what we see in the completed image is basically the data and information that was embedded in the cloth image itself. So If that's all they did was figure out the eyebrows and the eyelashes, and the rest is more or less accurate to the image on the cloth, I think they did an excellent job. But thank you, Dave7244, for your kindness, generosity, and support. Let's continue here.
He kind of just looks like a guy made out of wax. If only I knew an incorrupt corpse expert. Oh, I do. Elizabeth Harper,
This girl's got an incorruptible corpse expert as a friend. That's pretty interesting. And she's a mortician.
International relic hunter. Welcome.
Hi.
So, St. Camillus, like, what's up with him?
Well, when I saw him in Rome, the sacristan, the guy who's in charge of all of the relics, said he was incorrupt. But then he unlatched a compartment underneath the body, and St. Camillus's full skeleton was laid out inside.
So, wait. So the whole body is fake? And they have his body. And by the way, that skeleton, I don't believe is normally displayed. I think they cover the skeleton and just show you the wax portion. But I could be wrong. I have not been to Rome or this exact church. I've seen images both ways, with the skeleton not shown and with the skeleton with the panel removed and the skeleton underneath, the wax fake body displayed.
I knew it, St. Camillus, wax dude.
But that doesn't mean he's not incorrupt. You can't judge a Catholic corpse by its cover.
Okay, so help us understand. What is the concise definition of an incorrupt corpse?
And that's the problem. There really isn't a definitive, concise explanation of what an incorrupt corpse is. And it really, if you're Catholic, it depends on who you ask.
There's no concise definition.
Well,
There
then
you
let's
go.
talk like the list. How long is it? How many are there?
Yeah, there's no list either.
Well, then how is that even a title?
Well, everyone who's even considered for sainthood has to be exhumed and examined as part of the canonization process.
Yeah, that's morbid. Like, we're going to make you a saint, but first we have to dig up your body and check out how you're doing dead.
So you're a potential saint, maybe gonna be a saint, and I exhume you. What am I looking for? No rot at all? Are you supposed to be lifelike?
Our modern guidelines for what's acceptably incorrupt come from Pope Benedict XIV in 1734. This might
So the guidelines were set in 1734.
surprise you, but the most important word he used to describe the incorrupt wasn't lifelike, it was flexible.
So if they dig up your dead body and they're going to canonize you as a saint, if your body is flexible, that's good enough for them. And thank you, Humboldt Honey, for your kindness, generosity, and support. Love these topics. Do Saint Germain next. I just may do that. But the problem, Humboldt Honey, is that we get half the support for these kind of more serious shows and half the attendance, but we'll do our best. I did have sort of a series of Christian mysteries, and Saint Germain would certainly fit into that. And thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support, and for being a member. Thanks to all of our members for supporting the broadcasts.
Mummifying, no preservation allowed. So if you'd like to play along, I brought a game.
Tell me more.
It's called Incorrupt or Nah. First, since they're not
And by the way, just a warning, some of these are truly like bizarre. Like there's some that just look like a dead rotting body. It's weird when you go down this incorruptible bodies rabbit hole. And by the way, if you search our archive, we've done an entire video before just on this subject, the incorruptible bodies. I just wanted to throw this in because this is why I don't trust when the Catholic Church says something is a relic. By the way, there's lots of proven, completely and totally provably fake relics. I just wanted to throw this in to sort of display why I don't trust when the church says something is supernatural or paranormal.
Catholic saints, here are some nahs right off the bat. Lenin, nah. Bog bodies, nah. Rosalia Lombardo, the famous doll-like mummy from the Capuchin crypts, nah.
Okay, hit me with my first body.
St. Catherine of Siena.
Yeah, like I said, that's morbid. Why don't they bury that woman and let her rest in peace? She's like being displayed in a church like a carnival.
Incorrupt or nah?
Okay, I know St. Catherine. I just did a video about her, and there was all sorts of weird, miraculous preservation stuff around her. So I'm gonna say incorrupt.
Nah. In 1998, Italian pathologist Isil Fucari from the University of Genoa studied this group of medieval female saints, all thought to be incorrupt. But they'd had organs removed, they were stuffed with herbs, and they had resin rubbed into their skin. Everyone was so concerned with modesty that no one ever fully examined them.
Yeah, so that's interesting. They're taking steps to preserve the skin with different oils and things. That's not a naturally non-decaying body, in my opinion, in my view. If you have to do anything, I don't think that it should qualify. But the Catholic Church plays pretty fast and loose with the requirements for sainthood and for a saint to be considered having an incorrupt body or not.
So today they're no longer considered incorrupt.
Okay, 0 for 1. Caitlin, next one.
Okay, St. Paula Frassinetti.
This is another one. Look at that's morbid. They just have this thing on display like it's a circus or a carnival.
Incorrupt or nah?
So her skin looks preserved.
It is, with carbolic acid.
All right, so no preservation allowed at all. That would make this one a nah.
It's incorrupt.
What?
Yeah, it's incorrupt. When they first opened up St. Paula's tomb,
Look at this girl too. She's like taking selfies near the dead people. Nice.
4 years after her death, she was looking great, and the nuns of her order were thrilled. So thrilled that they had her preserved in carbolic acid. But since this happened after the discovery of her body, she's still considered incorrupt.
Is that you and
So they preserved the body with carbolic acid after they dug it up and it looked pretty good. I'm at a loss for this whole thing and why they would do these kind of things. Like, it's morbid to me. Let them be buried and rest in peace, not be gawked at for. Are they just going to leave him in there forever and they'll be gawked at for hundreds or thousands of years?
Saint Paula?
Yeah, it definitely is. A nun took the picture. It's fine. She insisted. Don't say no to it.
Yeah, you don't say no to a nun. 0 to 2.
St. Julian Aymard in Paris.
That
Now that's looks like another wax body.
is super creepy. That has to just be wax. So that is a nah. That is a nah.
No, he's incorrupt.
No!
Yes, he is. He's incorrupt, just like St. Paula. His church also tried to bathe him in carbolic acid, but it completely backfired and destroyed his body.
So the body was destroyed, but they still have it on display somehow.
What's now left of him is encased in this terrifying wax effigy that makes it look like he's been buried alive.
Sure makes me feel pious.
St. Anthony of Padua.
Oh, this one's interesting. So sometimes it's not an entire body that they declare incorrupt, just a part of the saint, like the head or different pieces, as we'll see here.
Incorrupt or nah?
Is that a body part?
Yeah, that's his tongue.
Okay, if this game has taught me anything so far, it's that I have to just go against every instinct that I have. So I'm gonna say that this is an incorrupt tongue.
You're right, it's incorrupt.
I'm
Sometimes
incorrupt.
only one body part is incorrupt, while the rest decomposes normally.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Sometimes they just say the heart of that saint is incorrupt, but the rest of the body is just rotting away as a normal human body would.
This is exactly what happened to St. Anthony of Padua. When his coffin was open, only his tongue survived intact. So it was detached and put on display in a reliquary.
Points on the incorrupt detached tongue. Thank you.
Ready for the lightning round?
Bring it.
Here are two skeletons wearing clothes. Which one is incorrupt?
The one on the bottom.
No, the one on the top is the incorrupt skeleton of St. Francesca Romana. Okay, two brown leather.
Yeah, these look like mummies, these two. These do not look like anything miraculous. It looks like you just put a body on a seat or standing up on a stand and let them just rot away inside your church or cathedral or whatever.
Three bodies. Which one is incorrupt?
Well, the one on the left is in a box, which makes me think she's more important. So the one on the left?
Correct.
Finally.
Okay, last one. Ready? Two wax bodies. This one is extra confusing because they're in the same church. So which one is incorrupt?
So this church has two of these bodies in it.
Awesome hat.
You're so right.
Incorrupt or not?
This is not me being bitter because I lost or anything, but if it's so random, why is this even still a criteria for sainthood?
Well, this is a big reason why the church doesn't consider incorruptibility a miracle anymore. It used to be that if you were found incorrupt, that could help you become a saint. But today there are just too many
Padre Pio is another of those.
natural explanations for finding bodies in this state. So incorruptibility has been downgraded from miraculous to a favorable sign.
A favorable sign.
Favorable
Okay, so
sign
it's
of sainthood.
All right, you're incorrupt. That doesn't mean you're a saint, but it doesn't hurt.
Basically.
Well, thank you for coming by to clear nothing up, Elizabeth. You can find more of her photographs and writing on her fantastic blog, All the Saints You Should Know. And you should know them.
You should.
Unlike me, who apparently knows none of them. Brought to you with support from People's Memorial Association and the...
All right, so I guess I've proved my point with that video. I don't trust when they say something is miraculous, because I don't think there's anything miraculous about these so-called incorrupt bodies. We'll take some questions and comments from the live chat. Got a little more time to share with you. The only thing that the shroud proves is that the Roman Empire killed lots of people, kind of like every empire that has existed to this day. Well, that's a very good point, right? And Sherry says it does look like a photograph, Stephen. Left eye thrashed, knocked out. Yeah, that some of those bodies don't look so good, right? Some of those bodies do not look incorrupt to me. They don't look good at all. All right, 1 second. I'm catching up to the live chat. I'm way behind, apparently. You guys are chatting away in there. And before I forget, please do take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe here. It really does help. Hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell. You'll know when we're doing one of these deep dives. And this is just the first of probably many shows on this subject we're going to go through. I have so many folders here. Have you looked into Eucharistic miracles? Yes. And that's another one that I think there's a lot of fraud and stupidity when it comes to that. Stephen is a scholar of theology. Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but I almost became a priest. I spent some time at the St. Charles Seminary before deciding that the priesthood was not for me. Sam Corbin is reminding everybody to hit the like button. Truth Seeker Show, are you an atheist? No, I am what most people would call an agnostic. I don't believe in atheism because I just can't wrap my mind around this universe being so perfect and there not being at least intelligent design that went into the universe, which would mean there would have to be a designer, or what many people would call God. People are mentioning the Catholic Church scandal. How many boys? Yes. The Sedlick ossuary. Oh, that's another interesting. I'm a good Catholic. I'm no longer Catholic. I stopped being Catholic for various reasons, but most of them are because I think that the Catholic Church is all about money, and they have proved that to me time and time again. I told this story many times, but a quick version is, when my father died, he was in hospice for 6 months. And then the funeral director called me and said, the church said that they can't do the mass or give you a priest to bury him. And I was like, what's going on? He's been in that church for 50 years. Like, he's volunteered there. Everybody knows who he is. Like, so I have to go to the rectory, and I find out they decided he wasn't a Catholic in good standing because he hadn't been to church for 6 months, they said. And I said, how do you know that? Well, we haven't gotten a church envelope from him. So the long story short, I had to pay $20 a week or something for 6 months. And then suddenly he was a good Catholic again, and they could do the mass and bury him. it was right then that I decided that I'm not going to support a church that treats people like that. My father had volunteered at that church for many, many years. He was well known, respected, and loved. And for the church to slap my family in the face while we were grieving like that, it didn't sit well with me. And famously, I went to the ATM machine and I got out the cash and I went back to the rectory and I literally threw it in the face of the priest and said, "You call that funeral director back as soon as I walk out of here and you finish making the arrangements. You're going to bury my father, or you and me and everybody in this rectory are going to have a big fucking problem." And I did drop an F-bomb. And interestingly, a different priest came to bury my father, and he was as nice and as could be, and he did apologize for the misunderstanding. But by that point, the damage is done, right? And Patty Wilhelm says the cash. Yes. That's interesting. Chol says, I went to a Quaker school, and that's what's wrong with America and the world. Yeah, I wasn't treated properly, and it was more just, my father died rather unexpectedly. He was in, they were talking about moving him to like a rehab hospital and that he would more fully recover and even come home. So we were very hopeful that his medical condition was improving, and then he just kind of died suddenly one night. So it was unexpected and, very difficult time. And this priest basically shaking me down for money at a time like that, I was so pissed. And I remained pissed for many years. And then I gave them another chance even after that one. And then the next thing was even worse that they did to my family. So I just said, I hope your church, I said to myself, and I know this is probably sinful and not a good Christian thing, but I remember thinking, I hope your church burns down and you all lose every financial resource you have. Something else, favorite song of 2025. I don't know. I'm not real big on newer music. I would have to say my favorite album that I started listening to heavily in 2025 was Ozzy Osbourne, Patient Number 9. I think it's an incredible album. And I just wish there was more Ozzy albums, but rest in peace, the Prince of Darkness. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. Von Schergen is here with one for the goal. And it would be a terrible show host if I didn't go and check in with the Kick Chat. And I apologize to the Kick Chat. Kind of, when I have to do these longer presentations with all of these different data points, it's very difficult to keep up with the show host stuff. So I apologize. Tampon Blood Magic said a rage quit. Thank you for that. And I was going to call out some subs or some gifted subs, but it looks like we are doing just okay here. We're all caught up on that, but please do support us over on Kick if you like the streams and want us to continue streaming there. Kick is a tremendous resource for people like me because it gives us an extra paycheck in the month. And everybody, imagine getting 5 paychecks for the month next month instead of 4. Kick really does help us with some extra money. And finally, a lot of people have asked me about this Corey Good situation. It's been since December 7th, and I'm still waiting on YouTube to try to resolve the false copyright claims and issues. But I will put on the record that it's pretty ridiculous because Mr. Good has made many false, here's what I'll say. He's made many false and defamatory statements in writing, which is a real problem. Like, the guy's a moron. He doesn't understand what he just did. He put in writing in these copyright takedown requests that the videos on my channel were stolen and that I've stolen other videos and that he called the police on me. Well, all of those statements are demonstrably easily proven false. So is it any surprise to me? And by the way, for those unaware, those are legal filings, and knowingly making false statements in writing in that legal filing is considered perjury. And this is where we're at. This guy is so stupid that he's telling people I stole videos and I stole other videos and that the police have been called on me. Well, we seem to recall another person who claimed I was a criminal. That would be his one-time partner, David Wilcox. So it doesn't surprise me that somebody like Corey Good would be both stupid enough, reckless enough, and dumb enough to make completely and totally defamatory false statements that are easily proven false. Show the proof that I stole a video. Show the proof that I stole other videos from other people. That's what he said essentially in his filings. Show the police report that proves that you called the police on me. Did you call the police on me for stealing a video? Like putting a video on YouTube? You called the police over that? Really? I'd love to see the police report. And if he can't produce it, then he knowingly made false statements to YouTube. And he can try to squirm out of it or worm out of it, but it is what it is. I will say that, all of these legal problems that we get, which are really childish and stupid, like you're going to threaten me with legal shit because we proved you're a lying scumbag, but this is what happens. There's a theory that the church impersonated a nun called Sister Lucia for approximately 50 years. The evidence is pretty credible. I have seen that. That is quite the rabbit hole, right? And Arlene says old rock is the best. Yeah, back before digital, right? And Choli Chol with one for the goal. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. He says for the legal defense fund. Well, it's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens with the whole situation. And I have never. Oh, we have Gotzenhammer gifted a sub. So thank you for your kindness, generosity. Gotzenhammer, I hope I'm saying that right. Go 6TZ6H Hammer 6R. I think it's Hexenhammer, maybe. You can tell me how to say that, but I thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support of the show. It is much, much appreciated. Tampon Blood Magic is over there applauding in the Kick Live chat. Good to see him as well. And we have Broken Hip has been a member for 2 months, so thank you for that. And thanks to all of our members. People have asked me, how do I become a member? You just smash the join button, and for a few dollars a month, you get member badge, letting everybody in the live chat know you're a big show supporter, and you get access to our members only section with many extra videos. So you get a bunch of extra goodies as well, and we thank you all for that. And failing that, you can join on Patreon for $1 a month. You get the same benefits, but you don't get the extra YouTube goodies. So I'm glad that we started. This is just the start of trying to tackle this subject. And let me know in live chat, put a 1 if you want to see me interview some experts on the Shroud of Turin and have some guests that are experts or researchers into the Shroud of Turin. And a 2 if you don't care to see experts. If you don't want me to do interviews with the experts on this particular subject. And if you have any suggestions for future shows, please put them in all capital letters, and we consider all those things. I have a huge list of shows that people ask me, subjects that people ask me to do shows on. Would you want 2 if you want Wilcock as a guest? I don't think I would want him. But I am seeing a lot of 1s, so we'll see if we can't reach out. There's many people that I suppose you could say are kind of on the podcast circuit that are experts in the Shroud of Turin or have done many years of research. And if you're interested, there is one website, and he's first on my list. There's a gentleman, it's called Shroud Research, SHROUD research.net. And there is an interesting gentleman there named Bob Rucker. And Bob Rucker has a Bachelor of Science and a master's degree in nuclear engineering from the University of Michigan, and professional engineering certificates in nuclear engineering and mechanical engineering. He worked for 38 years in the nuclear industry, performing nuclear analysis computer calculations for the design of advanced nuclear reactors. He's one of the big researchers and maybe one of the people who are claiming that it is some form of radiation which created the image on the shroud. I've listened to several of his interviews, and he's got some interesting science to back up his belief that the shroud is indeed the genuine burial cloth of Christ. Father Andrew Dalton, sure. Father Malachi Martin, oh, if only I could. That guy's interesting. His books, I really liked Malachi Martin's books and his interviews on Art Bell. Anybody remember those? That's a blast from the past. Father Malachi Martin, for those unaware, he was a Catholic priest and also an exorcist. And they made some Hollywood movies, and Russell Crowe played him in the latest Hollywood retelling of his story, which was not good. I think they went a little too Hollywood on that one, right? They got to drama it up, but holy, they have him shooting a pig in this because he convinced the demon to jump from a human host to the pig, and then he shot the pig in the head. It's a whole. I didn't like that movie. I think that movie's called The Pope's Exorcist, but it is true that Malachi Martin was a Catholic priest and exorcist, and he was the exorcist for Rome for quite some time. All right, so I believe, my friends, that we have done our due diligence. I believe I will be back on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. But I have to say, there's some good news, and that is I'm off another one of these terrible meds that make me drowsy and tired and lethargic, and I'm feeling a lot better. So we may go back to our usual schedule. I'm trying to keep things light. For those unaware, I just had a big medical thing happen, and I'm slowly feeling like myself again and recovering. And our current schedule is Tuesdays and Thursdays, and sometimes a weekend show. And if you get a chance, we did a Kick exclusive show just on Sunday. So go over to our Kick channel. It's kick.com Truth Seeker Show. You'll find us. And there is Urban Terror with One for the Goal saying, great show and subject tonight. You didn't have to raise your blood pressure. That's another part of this equation. It used to be, believe it or not, way back when this show started, Urban Terror, what we would do is we would have like a week's worth of shows that were like Tonight Show, kind of like calm and scholarly, a lot of research and a lot to ponder, and a lot of discussion or interviews that were kind of more on the calm side. And then maybe once every couple of weeks, there'd be a big blowout show where I'd be yelling and screaming at scumbags and grifters. And for whatever reason, well, I kind of know the reason, those shows get more attention and get more views. So I kind of got passively encouraged to be a maniac more. But I'm going to try to get back to, being calm and, I don't know. I don't want to screw up my Zen or my health with I'm supposed to avoid things that raise my blood pressure right now for obvious reasons. And I think a good way to do it is to have some of these more calm shows. But you're right, Urban Terror. Thanks for noticing. And we have, is Yale of stuff? Is a why a lot of stuff? I think that is. Glad you're doing better. Thanks for the show. Well, thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. Much, much appreciated. And we have M3GA Princess says, great show and very good to hear you're recovering. I'm feeling so much better this week than I did in the previous weeks. I guess all that rest helps. I really am trying to take it easy and not do much. Against my better judgment, I started binge watching Stranger Things, which I completely missed, But I'm one of those late adopters. Like, I didn't do Game of Thrones until it was years old. I didn't do Breaking Bad until it was years old, or Sopranos until it was years old. Von Schergen with one for the goal says, "Oh my God, the goal." Well, yes, the goal is going to end here, but we got more than halfway there, and that's good enough. And Freddie the Cat, thank you for the show. Thank you, Von Schergen, for being a member of your kindness, generosity, and support. And thank you, Freddie the Cat, for your kindness, generosity, and support. And Arlene is reminding everybody that the Kick only streams, how to get to them. But if you're a YouTube channel member or a Patreon supporter, I do upload those. I upload all of the Kick only shows, so you can catch the replay in the member section or on Patreon as well. Otherwise, you got to go over to Kick before I think they only keep the streams for 2 weeks at my level, and then the shows are deleted and newer shows will be there. In other words, they don't archive every show like YouTube does. But thank you, Arlene, for your kindness and moderation. Best moderator in the game. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support, all of you supporters. So we have done our due diligence. Like I said, I should be back on Thursday, but if I'm feeling like I am today, I might get another show off I've got a lot of things on my to-do list, and tonight was one of them. So thank you for coming here and spending some time with me to explore what I believe is an enduring mystery. My mind is still not made up. There are some things about this whole thing that just scream something's weird here, right? Like the pollen on the cloth that comes from plants that is only in Jerusalem. That's a weird one, you know? And there's a great deal of blood evidence, but it's a little data heavy. The science on the blood that was found, and by the way, it is verifiably real human blood, is another head scratcher, because there's blood that was pre-mortem blood, there's blood that was post-mortem blood, meaning that the body was bleeding while it was alive, and then there was blood that oozed out after the death event. And both types of blood, both pre-mortem and post-mortem, have been verifiably found on the shroud. And if we are to believe the skeptics that this is just a hoax, well, that's some great lengths to go to. Get the pollen from plants from Jerusalem. Make sure that the image can be seen like a photograph once you do a photo negative of it. Put blood on it from a living person and a dead person. It's an enduring mystery. That's why we're here, because I'm going to continue to look into this enduring mystery. And there's been a resurgence of interest in the Shroud of Turin in the recent years. And you'll see that on YouTube. If you just put Shroud of Turin in the search box, you'll see there's lots of Tucker Carlson did a show on this, Piers Morgan. It's becoming a very popularized subject again. So I wanted to dive back into it. The 3D information being embedded on this leads me to believe, like, how does a hoaxer know how to do all of this before in the 1300s? I would really love to conduct some of my own experiments to see if we can form an image, something like the Shroud. And I happen to have a life-size bust of Jesus. Got to dig it out. I think it's somewhere in a box. Since, you ever move and you just never unpack things? It's just, it's boxes in my garage that were put there the day we moved in, But it would be interesting to see if we can recreate something like the Shroud of Turin. And if you guys would like to see that, I'll certainly give it a try. There's various ways that people have tried to reproduce the image, usually with some sort of a mask or a sculpture, and they pigment the sculpture and then they lay the shroud over it and press, and that creates an imprinted image, perhaps. It's definitely interesting. And of course, being raised Catholic, these kind of things have always fascinated me. And as a child who was trying to be a good Christian and really wanted to believe that my religion was true and real. And, I would look to these things like relics or like the Shroud of Turin as proof that the Bible wasn't just stories, that the Bible was more than that, right? The Shroud was Jacques Demolay and not Jesus, Stephen the Cambion. Okay, if you say so. So we've done our due diligence. I am going to bounce on out of here. Please follow me on Twitter at Stephen Cambion. If you're listening in audio podcast land, we love and appreciate you. But please do go on over to Twitter, put Truth Seekers, one word in the search bar. You'll see a strange guy with sunglasses pop up. That would be me. Go to the channel, smash the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. It really, really does help. And we love and appreciate you guys in audio podcast land, but you're missing the live interactive tapings, and we love that. So we welcome you to be a part of it. So, and also, if anybody has ideas or suggestions for shows, you can, and show topics, you can email me at truthseekershow@gmail.com. So that's all I got for you, friends. I hope that this, I guess, first dive into this enduring mystery was interesting to you. Thanks for coming here and spending some time with me. No place I would rather be, but that's all I got for you, friends. So until next time, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.